How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the channel. I'm the ChainBaker, and in today's video we'll make a Georgian cheese bread. In fact, this was one of the first recipes I made on my channel. I thought it would be nice to revisit it and update it. Let's go to the kitchen and check it out. Depending on where you go in Georgia, there will be different Khachapuri. This one is Adjaruli Khachapuri. I probably pronounced that incorrectly, but anyway, it comes from a place near the sea. The shape of it resembles a boat. The cheese represents the sea and the egg yolk represents the sun. For me, it represents absolute cheesy deliciousness, and it's one of the most beautiful Khachapuris you can make. As soon as it comes out of the oven, you top it with an egg yolk and a knob of butter. Then you mix it all together into kind of a cheese sauce. Then just tear off a piece of bread, scoop up that cheese and tuck in. It is such a unique bread experience. You should definitely try it out. So let's get right to it and see what we need to make this. For the dough, we'll need white bread flour, water, yeast, salt and olive oil. The filling should be made with Georgian cheese, which is basically unobtainable where I live. So I'm using a mix of feta and mozzarella at a 50-50 ratio. The filling also contains a whole egg. Now we're making 2 Khachapuris, so we need 2 egg yolks to top them with and 2 knobs of butter. Last but not least, a little bit of molten butter to brush the edge with as it comes out of the oven. As for the equipment, we'll need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe and a brush. If you don't own a brush, then just take a piece of solid butter in your fingers and rub it on the edge of the bread. I'm also going to use a bit of parchment paper. This will make it easier to move the loaf around. Although not totally necessary since these loaves are quite small, I'm going to use this pizza paddle for sliding them into the oven. If you don't have one, just place them in with your hands. Finally, it would be nice to have a good solid base to bake on. I'm going to use my pizza steel. If you don't have one, you can use a cast iron skillet like this, or a thick tray. Let's get the filling out of the way. Take a bowl, combine the mozzarella, the feta and the whole egg, then mix it all until smooth. Then cover it up and leave it in the fridge until it's needed. You can add different cheeses to this mix if you like, but this mix works really well. The feta brings the saltiness and the mozzarella takes care of the stretch. Now let's move on to the dough, and as ever, I'm using cold water. Since the dough will be kneaded by hand, it will warm up quite a lot. And if you want to learn more about temperature control and how it affects bread making, check out the Principles of Baking playlist. Now in a large bowl, combine the water, the yeast, the salt and the olive oil. Give it all a good mix. You want to dissolve the salt and hydrate the yeast. And no, mixing salt and yeast has no negative effects on fermentation. You'll find a video about this in the Principles of Baking playlist too. Now once you've given it a good mix, add the flour, grab your scraper and mix it to a dough. Mix it in a bowl until there's no more dry flour left. And if the scraper's not doing the job, continue on by hand. Now pop the dough out on the table and we can start kneading it. It's a relatively low hydration dough at about 65%, so we'll use the regular kneading method. What I like to do is press the dough down and forwards with the heel of my right hand, then using fingers on my left hand I fold the piece of dough under the heel of my right hand, then turn it and repeat. It will get a little bit sticky, so just grab your scraper, scrape it together and continue kneading. If you want to make this in a mixer, you might want to double the amount. Mix it for 5 minutes on medium speed, and that's the same amount of time we're going to mix it by hand. After 5 minutes mixing, the dough should be nice and smooth. It may still be a little bit sticky, but that's normal. Let's pop it in the bowl and take its temperature. Around 25 degrees Celsius or 77 Fahrenheit is just about right for this. If your dough is warmer, it'll ferment more rapidly. If it's cooler, it'll take longer. I'm going to cover this up and leave it to ferment for 1 hour. And after the first hour of fermentation, we need to give it a fold. Folding will degas the dough and it will tighten it. Now you can find videos about why folding and degassing is important in the Principles of Baking playlist. To perform a fold, dust the dough with flour lightly, release it from the bowl and place it out on the table with the smooth side down. Now flatten it out and fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach the point where you started. Then flip it smooth side up again and tighten it against the table. And that's the fold done. Now we can place it back into the bowl and let it ferment for 1 more hour. And now it should really start puffing up. After the second hour of fermentation, we can divide the dough into 2, since we're making 2 Khachapuris, or you can make 4 tiny ones if you like. It's important to weigh your dough when you're dividing it, that is if you want your breads to be the same size. Give it a dusting of flour, place it on the scales, check the weight and then divide it in half. Adding up all the ingredients from the recipe will never give you an accurate amount. You will always lose some dough during mixing and kneading. Now there might not be a huge difference when you're making 2 larger loaves, but if you were to make a bunch of little rolls, the last one would always be the smallest one. After dividing, we need to shape these into round balls. Place the dough on the table with the smooth side down, just as earlier with a fold. Fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach the point where you started. Then flip it smooth side up again, tighten it against the table, and that's your shaping done. Now repeat with the second one. Grab a tray or a plate, dust it with flour and place the dough balls on it. The reason why I'm using a tray is so that I can move them around more easily. Since I'm going to bake these one by one, I'm going to place the second dough ball in the fridge to slow down fermentation whilst the first one is baking. This will prevent it from overproofing. Saying that, these breads are relatively small, so I could have baked them at the same time. But I've got problems like thumbnails and video intros to think about. Now dust them with some flour to avoid any stickiness, cover them up and leave them for the final proof, which should take about an hour. Whilst they're proofing, preheat your oven, 230 degrees Celsius, fan off, and that is 444 degrees Fahrenheit. These bad boys have popped up beautifully. Now we can do the final shaping. If your dough balls are taking longer, then leave them for longer. Dust the table with flour quite generously and dust the dough ball. Start pressing it out by hand and only then move on to the rolling pin. This will ensure that it opens up evenly. You want to roll this to a large oval shape. Now there are two methods of shaping this Khachapuri. You can do it the way I do in the video, by first shaping it into a boat and then filling it with cheese. Or you can roll out the dough like this, spread the cheese on top and then shape it into a boat. If you use the second method, you'll end up with a stuffed crust Khachapuri, which is pretty cool. But you'll need about 50 grams more cheese per bread. Either way, the rolling up is the same in both cases. Start from the top, fold down about the 2 cm wide edge, and then repeat once again. As you fold it down, you can seal it up with your fingertips to make it stick. Now repeat one more time. Rolling it 3 times is more than enough. Again, seal it up so it doesn't unravel. And now repeat the same steps on the bottom side. We'll end up with 2 loose ends. Roll them up towards each other until they meet. And finally, twist them around each other and press them together. You can press quite firmly into the table to make sure it doesn't open up. Now if you don't have some of the equipment that I mentioned earlier, don't worry, you can still make this bread. Just bake it on the tray that you have. I'm just showing the best case scenario. A thick, hot, solid base to bake on makes the bread jump up. It rises a lot better that way and it bakes from the bottom nicely. If you don't own such a thing, you can still make great bread. Right, so place half of the cheese on the Khachapuri and then spread it out nice and evenly. If you want it to look perfect, then don't get any of the cheese on the edge. And just as a pizza, this can go straight into the oven after shaping. It'll take around 14 to 15 minutes at this temperature. Once the cheese has bubbled up and become golden brown all over, and once the edges of the bread are golden brown, it's ready. And I'm getting hungry just looking at this. But there are a couple more things we need to do before we tuck in. First off, brush the edge with butter, generously. It'll soften it and give it a nice buttery flavor. And just look at that shine. Next up, make a little nest for the egg yolk and place it into it. And finally add the knob of butter and mix it all together. In my previous recipe, I added a little bit of the egg white as well, but that required the bread to go back in the oven for a couple minutes, which is not really practical, so this is an improvement to the method. And don't worry about the raw egg yolk, it gets cooked as you mix it with the hot cheese. Of course, you should use eggs that are safe. If you are worried or unsure, then pop the bread back in your oven and cook the egg yolk, just for a little bit. You'll enjoy this bread either way. So what do you think of this delicious Georgian cheese boat? Have you ever tried it before? Have you tried any other Khachapuri? Let me know down in the comments. See more videos like this one? Click right here. Subscribe to the channel, click over here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.